we work on knitting and discuss Hallmark Channel movies. I'm Cece, and today we're going to be talking about tulips in spring. So what I'm working on today is actually the same scarf, I would say, that I was working on last time I did one of these, except that I didn't like the pattern I was using, so I ripped out all the stitches and I started all over again. So here we are, right back where we were last time, but I'm liking this one much better, so happy with that. Also, I just donated blood, which is why this is happening, so don't be alarmed at that. And they pricked me twice, so I got 2 band-aids happening here on my fingers, but it's all good. It's all good. Alright, so what we're here for. Tulips in spring. So just a quick synopsis of the movie. I should say that these are spoilers, but honestly, if you watch Hallmark movies ever, you know they're extremely predictable, and once you have a vague notion of what the movie's about, you can guess every single plot point. So if this is a spoiler, then maybe this is not the channel for you. Anyways, quick synopsis. So we've got Rose. Rose works for a interior design company in LA, and she's giving a presentation because she's just landing her first big job. Her boss has decided to take a chance on her with this really important large house to design the interior of. Well, Rose gets a call from her family back on the tulip farm, and unfortunately her father has fallen and broken his leg, so she decides she needs to go home for a couple weeks in order to help her family because it's right at the harvest when all the tulips are blooming. I mean, standard, right? So her and her father had a bit of a falling out when she chose interior design instead of running the family farm, and she actually hasn't been home in 3 years. So when she gets there, she learns that not only has her family hired an operations manager to help with running of the farm, they've also hired a flower broker. The flower broker's name is Tom, and she thinks he's slimy because, I don't know, I guess flower brokers sell flowers and charge a markup between them and as they're essentially a middleman, so they're taking a chunk of the profits. I guess, I don't know, are there a lot of corrupt flower brokers out there? I don't know. Apparently, it's a thing, I guess. I don't know. But she is not at all for the flower broker. So once she's home and she's helping with the harvest, she learns that her father has been working on a hybrid rose to submit to a big contest. Apparently, her parents are struggling to manage the farm. They are hoping that by winning this big contest, they can generate new business and get a lot more known in order to keep the farm. However, the contest is only 2 weeks away, and their hybrid rose has not bloomed yet, and they can't figure out why. Well, naturally, there's another farm, tulip farm nearby, and the woman who runs that farm has made an offer on the Newell farm, that's what it's called, the Newell farm, and she has secretly been sabotaging their hybrid rose through the operations manager. Luckily, Rose figures this out. In her few days that she has, she quickly forces the flowers to bloom, so then they can submit them to the contest and saves the day. But then she gets a call from her boss saying she needs to get back because her big design project that she's been sort of helping out with remotely, the people are coming back early and she needs to get out there right away. So she ends up leaving before the contest ends. And of course, the house she designed turned out fabulously. Her boss is like, this is it, you're great, you're ready, I'm going to give you your first solo project, it's going to be great, you're awesome. And then she's like, oh no, actually I've decided I want to stay on my parents and run my parents' tulip farm. So she does, she goes back to the tulip farm, to Tom and her parents, just in time for the big harvest fest where they announce the winner of the hybrid rose and, guess who wins, so on and so forth. Typical Hallmark movie. Nothing groundbreaking here. But it was a nice little romp. Not through the daisies, through the tulips. Ha ha ha. Alright, so first thing I want to talk about is the setting. So it takes place on a tulip farm, and it's gorgeous. The tulips are all in bloom. The whole movie, just rows and rows of tulips. When she's not in the tulip fields, they're like delivering the tulips to nurseries and whatnot. So there's just flowers everywhere, flowers all over the place, floral prints on the interior decorating. It is just lovely. I love a floral print. I love flowers. It was a gorgeous, gorgeous set. And it was springtime, I guess tulips bloom in spring. At least they do where I live. So it's just really nice, really nice. I just looked at my notes. My notes said, positively breathtaking. Alright, notes. I will make sure to add that. As for where they are in the world, I couldn't even begin to guess. I don't know where they grow tulips in the US. Or Canada. I mean, there could be Canada. Do they grow tulips in Canada? I don't know. Where do they have tulip farms? But it's not a script. Just fields of flowers. Standard accents. There's just nothing to indicate where they are. But anyways, on to the main characters. So obviously our main female character is Rose. Flower name, because this is a movie about flowers. It's just like their Christmas movies all have, women named Noelle and Eve and Holly. Naturally, they have a woman named Rose. And then Tom is played by Lucas Bryant, who I've been a fan of ever since Haven. So that's actually why I picked this movie. I was scrolling through my Hallmark Channel, Hallmark Movies Now app, because, well, I can't watch the regular Hallmark movies right now because we're in July and it's all Christmas movies. Don't get me wrong, I love the Christmas movies. I watch them all Christmas long. However, it is July, it's the middle of summer, I don't want to watch Christmas movies. To the point, I live someplace where it's cold, we have winter. It just seems like the summer is so short as it is. I don't want to rush it in any way or dismiss it in any way. So Hallmark's been airing Christmas movies since the end of June. At least they started with June in the Hallmark's Mysteries. The Mystery Movies and Mysteries channel started in June, and then the main channel started in July. And I haven't seen a single one yet. So normally I watch the Saturday night new movies, but in this case, I needed an older movie. So I needed a non-Christmas movie, so I went to the Hallmark Channel, Hallmark Movies Now app, which has older movies. So this was actually from 2016. But I was scrolling through just the little thumbnails, saw Lucas Bryant, and I was like, yes, let me watch that one. So that's how scientifically these movies are chosen. I pick them by who's in them. And in this case, that it seemed summery. I guess it's tulips in spring, but it still seemed very summery to me. They do have a bit of a meet cute moment, because when she gets home to help out her family, he is actually on the ladder repairing some damage to the house on the second story. So she walks into her room and she hears hammering. So she comes to the window, which is open, and he's right there. And so she's startled by him, he's startled by her, and then the ladder starts to tip back and he's like falling. And so then she sticks out her hand and pulls him back in, leans up against the house. So as far as meet cutes go, that would have been one of the best ones I've seen, because it was absolutely adorable. Until she ruined it. Because naturally, in one of those situations, my first reaction would be like, oh my god, are you okay? Like, I'm so sorry I startled you. I'm so glad you didn't get hurt. Like, I would be freaking out. And she was freaking out too, but in a completely opposite way. She's like, who are you? Why is there a stranger here? I'm like, a stranger? Like, what do you think he's gonna do? Rob the house? It's like, here's this large farmhouse with its doors unlocked, its windows open. I know what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put a ladder against the wall, climb up, and start repairing some of the windowsills and the gutters. It's like, what did she think he was doing? So that ruined the moment a little bit. If she'd just been like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, are you okay? Like, you scared me, I'm sorry I scared you, then it would have been perfect. But she ruined it by immediately calling him a stranger and being like, what are you doing here? Like, clearly he had a purpose there. But it was adorable, up until she yelled at him. So Hallmark has a lot of times where they make these female characters who are like, you want to be in control of every moment, every situation. And so that's kind of what the vibe she's giving. So she's immediately like, what are you doing here? Who are you? Why are you here? So she starts to get that sort of controlling nature, temperament you get from a lot of the Hallmark ones. But they give her a little bit more dimension, because later they're giving a speech, a pep talk to the crews that are there to help with the harvest. And she starts to give sort of this really ridiculous speech, and then she realizes she's out of her depth and it's kind of ridiculous, and she turns it over to Tom. So I like that she's actually self-aware. She's not completely so absorbed with control in every situation, because usually what it ends up is they're so controlling, so obsessed with everything, that then they end up making fools of themselves because they can't relinquish control, or they're out of their depth, they don't know what they're doing, and instead of giving it over to someone who does, they just dig in even deeper, and it's a disaster. But no, she recognized, hold up, this is not going away. It should be. I'm clearly not ideally suited for this, and just hands it over to Tom. So I really liked that about her, and in fact, I liked her more than I thought I was going to. Except for one thing, which I'll get into later. The other nice thing about these two, Tom and Rose, is they actually had some chemistry. Last movie I watched, there was zilch in the chemistry department. It was rough watching. You were kind of like, ugh. That, and they actually had a believable story. Like, a lot of times with these movies, they manufacture these reasons for them to keep running into each other. So they sort of force these relationships to start. Whereas this was completely natural, because he's working on the farm, she's working on the farm, they're working together these long hours, day after day, to get this harvest in. So they're just constantly in each other's presence. So I think then the development of the rapport and the relationship just came about so much more naturally than you often see in these movies. That, and there was this adorable moment when she gets something on her cheek and he's like, oh, you got something on your face, and then she rubs the wrong side and she gets more mud on her face, and he looks at her and smiles, and oh, it is heart fluttering. It was very nice. And it's one moment where they almost kiss, again, you're like, ooh, yep. So definitely something there, which was nice. Nice when you have romantic leads that actually seem romantic. There are a couple of secondary characters I want to touch on. First of all, there's Rob, Rose's boyfriend. Yes, that's right. Rose has a boyfriend. That's the bit of her I don't particularly care about, because she's basically carrying on with Tom. All the while, Rob is out back in LA unknowing about what's going on. And I'm going to be honest with you, Rob seems like a great guy. Like, right from the very beginning of the movie, when she's going into that big presentation for that big job, Rob works for the same firm. So he's like, honey, you got this. You're going to blow them out of the water. You're so talented. You're so great. Don't worry about it. You're awesome. And I'm like, yeah, Rob, way to support your woman. And then throughout the movie, he's very attentive. He's always calling, checking in on her, asking her, let's go get some dinner, making sure she eats. And so when she's away at her family tulip farm, he's like calling her all the time and leaving messages, because at one point he finally gets a hold of her and he's like, hey, I've left you like a ton of messages. And she's like, oh, I've been copying you on all of the emails I've been sending about the house interior design work for the big project. She's like, so is there any problems? Everything should be all set. And he's like, yeah, no, I got those. He's like, my voicemail messages were about you. Like, how are you doing? How is it going? How's your father? How are the tulips? Is everything okay? The kind of conversations you have with people who matter in your life. And she was just kind of like, oh, yeah, it's great, I can't talk now. And that's it. It's like, Rob, you deserve better. You deserve so much better. And then when she goes back to LA, and he's like, let's go out to celebrate since you nailed that big job. They're at dinner, and she starts to be like, Rob, you're a great guy. He's like, yeah, and you're a great girl. And he's like, but we're just not great together. And she's like, what? Are you breaking up with me? Are you breaking up with me? I mean, she was literally about to break up with him. He's like, what? Am I supposed to just sit here and wait for you to break up with me? And she's like, oh, well, no. It's like, this guy's emotional intelligence is just up here. He's on top of it. Checking in with her, realizing that she is not invested with him at all. And he's like, well, I deserve better. I'm getting out. So, hopefully Rob found a woman who treats him the way he deserves to be treated versus being ignored like Rose did. And she's out there kissing Tom when Rob's back home. It was just, nope. Do not approve. Do not approve of that sort of business. Another secondary character is Caroline. That's Rose's boss at the interior design firm. Horrible. She is a horrible boss, horrible employer. She is rude. She is condescending. She threatens Rose on numerous occasions. Not her life, but like her job. Like, she's like, I'm gonna give you this job. She's like, but this, if you so much as mess this up, that's the end of you. And I'm like, what? What kind of horrible person does that? A good boss will lift up their employees and encourage them and help them grow and spread their wings and become successful. I'm like, this woman's just awful. And then when Rose is like, oh my god, my dad's had an accident, I need to go home and help out with the family, her boss is like, I just gave you this big job. This is your priority. It has to be your priority. And she's like, my family? And the boss is like, okay, fine, you can go, but just so you know, this is your number one priority, not your family, this. And I'm like, please. How do you keep employees if you treat them that way? Nope, just nope for me. And then finally, if you thought Caroline's bad, then we've got Violet. So another woman raised on a tulip farm. She has now taken over the management of her family's tulip farm. So hence the name Violet. And she's the one who's competing with the Newell farm. And she is a caricature of evil businessmen. I mean, she's ridiculous. It's just, she openly flirts with Tom and tries to offer him a job. She has made an offer on the farm, and then she's hired someone to sabotage, and then she's always showing up places and like gossiping and like rubbing people's noses in it. Like, oh, I hear you're having trouble at your farm. I hear like maybe your hybrid tulip won't be ready. And then they're like, how do you know that? It's like the evil scientists or bad guys in like Bond films that reveal their plan in front of the hero before killing them, but then the hero escapes and knows everything that's going to happen. It's like, no one does that in real life. But she's like, I had a little birdie tell me like are you trying to get caught? Like, don't be ridiculous. And then at one point, she's asking Tom, she's telling, she's like touching Tom's arm. She sees him in town, she's like flirting with him. And then she's like, so are you sure you don't want to come work for me? Obviously the New Wolf Farm is going under. He's like, nah, I'm good. I'll take my chances. And she's like, oh, is this about Rose? I see the way you look at her. She's been there like, what, 3 days at that point? He barely knows her. And he's obviously turned down jobs from Violet already. So it's like, what was she thinking? That was crazy to me. And then her outfits. Her outfits are a whole nother topic. In fact, I'm going to take some time to talk about the outfits and the costumes overall, in general, because I have a few things to say on that topic. Now, a little background, I do design costumes for the theater. I don't make any money on it, it's just kind of a passion project, I spend hours and tons of money and my sanity, and then I do it all over again. It's just a never-ending cycle. I don't know why I do it, but for some reason I like it. So I do tend to notice costumes in movies maybe a little bit more so than the average person. And as far as costumes go in the Hallmark Channel movies, they're all the same. It's very, I don't want to say basic. There's a very specific sort of look that they're going for with the Hallmark Channel movies. They all have this same look. The women are always dressed so nicely. They're wearing dresses or beautiful pants, suits and ensembles. Their hair and makeup's always pristine. It's funny because when I watch these movies when they have like a moment where they like get all dressed up for some sort of big event, like an evening gala or ball or something, and they put on these gowns and they come out and the guy's always like, whoa. And I'm like, I'm looking at them trying to figure out what's different, because the fact is their hair and makeup and dresses have been perfect the entire time. They look exactly the same in this sort of glow up moment, whereas, as average people, I mean, I'm not wearing a stitch of makeup right now, so if I actually put some effort in, wearing my makeup, did my hair, put on a gown, then yeah, there would be a noticeable difference. But Hallmark movies, no, because they look spectacular every second of the movies. They're lounging at home in their sweats. It still looks adorable, and they're always so pristine and gorgeous, and that's fine. That's the look. Just like their towns are always perfect, everything's just gorgeous, and that's fine. That's the aesthetic. So I usually don't pay much attention to the costumes because there's really nothing noticeable about them, with the exception of sometimes the shoes. Now, I freely admit I'm a shoeaholic. I love shoes. I have way too many shoes, dozens and dozens of stilettos, lots of colors, patterns, you name it. So I do follow the trends in shoe fashions, and I understand everyone has your sort of different style, and we all have different budgets. So, I would love to have a closet full of Louboutins. I don't, because I can't afford one pair. But I am aware of what's sort of going on with footwear. I could be a little bit critical of it. I mean, I'm not going around judging what everyone's got on their feet. Okay, maybe I'm low-key judging what everyone's got on their feet. But I understand we're all at different points in our lives and budgets and whatnot, and again, different styles that we like, so I'm not judging hard. I just look at something and be like, well, I wouldn't choose to wear that, but you do you. But with these Hallmark movies, come on, we've got a clear aesthetic going on with the costumes. I expect a shoe to match. And often I am disappointed. I see the shoes and I'm just horrified. But in this movie I was not. At one point they panned down when Rose and Caroline are in the big house for the big project. For the first time, they pan down, we see both of what they're wearing, and fantastic shoes. Fantastic shoes. I'm going to try and insert a clip of those shoes here. Rose's shoes they got these big bows on, and while she's in this like all pink and florally outfit, I don't remember specifically what she was wearing in that scene, but definitely something kind of very, very flirty and feminine. And then to have the shoes with the bows on it was a little twee. Like, I love the shoes, I love them. Would I have paired them with that outfit? No, that's too much. Like, those shoes I would save for when, if they were mine, because like I said, I love them. I've totally owned something, and I've owned some shoes that look like that. Those I would save for something a little more structured. So if I had something more more plain and structured, that's when you throw in the bow, because you need a little. Oops, I was supposed to be purling. The bow with the floral, it was just a little on the nose, a little too girly floral. But they're great shoes, and I think with a different outfit they would be fantastic. And the boss's shoes were stunning. I love them. I want them. But you know what? In those scenes, those shoes are completely appropriate. Here are two women whose businesses design, so for them to have really nice clothes and nice footwear, appropriate. What's not appropriate is high heels on a farm. The women in this movie wore high heels in pretty much every scene, and half of the scenes were in farms and fields, and it was so inappropriate. And I'm just like, why? Why are you wearing high heels in a farm? At one point, Rose does wear like hot pink rain boots, which are totally adorable. I have rain boots that are floral with butterflies on them, so I'm down for a bold, flirty rain boot. But like at one point, there's a big bonfire, and Violet shows up. So it's a big bonfire to kick off the start of the festival. And Violet shows up, so it's nighttime. There's a bonfire going. Everyone's out there in their jeans. There's a band playing. There's people drinking cider probably, or I don't know what you drink at a Tulip festival. But anyways, people are mingling, they're dancing. It's just a great time in the dark in this field around this bonfire. Carolyn shows up, and she is wearing a fitted dress with a blazer and high heels that look like stilettos. In a field for a bonfire. What is that? What? I mean, A, what was going through her head, or what was like, and then later at the Harvest Festival, which is again in the field, it was like a giant fair, and Tom and Rose get together, and he kisses her, and then he picks her up and swings her around. We get to see what she's wearing on her feet. High heels. Like, she knew she was going to be in a field, and she wore high heels. Rose and Violet are women who grew up on farms. They know what kind of footwear to wear to these situations, and yet both these women are showing up walking around in high heels? Like, come on. I go to the fair, I wear, well, typically when I go, it's usually fall time, so we're breaking out the boots again, but still, even in springtime, I wouldn't wear high heels into a field. It's ridiculous. Let's think about that, guys. Costume designers, Hallmark costume designers, appropriate footwear for the women. There was one other costume choice that I did want to make a note of. Rose, throughout the movie, wore floral print. So it was very apparent right from the very beginning, because she was in this boardroom giving her presentation to get the big job, and everyone's sort of in business neutrals. So grays and blacks, navies and beiges, it's just very bland. And then she's in like pink and floral, and it was really, really obvious. And then she wore florals throughout the entire movie. So if she wasn't wearing florals, she was wearing pink. It was a very deliberate choice that she always looked kind of flowery, whatever she was wearing. And while I didn't like I thought the contrast in that boardroom was a little stark. Like, I would have maybe had some color out there, kept her florals, but at least had a little bit of color so it wasn't quite as obvious. So different. But the truth dressing her all in florals throughout the movie, that's totally a choice I would have made, honestly. So I can't be mad at it. It's definitely something I would have done if I had asked me this movie. I would have been like, yeah, I'm gonna put Rose in florals because that's kind of her personality. And then my final thing, which is a little thing that kind of drives me crazy a little bit, was the size of the Newell Farm patch that was like on her shirt. It was like, well, I'm much bigger than she is, but it like took up like the whole thing. Like it went from like the buttons all the way to her armpit, and I'm like, and there was a lot of empty space. I mean, come on, those patches could have been so much smaller. Who designed that? That was just something that was weird. I'm like, why is that so big? Seems unnecessary. A few final thoughts. So these are just my usually the random things I jotted down during the movie that don't really have a place in any of the previous topics. The first one is the crew that's been assembled to help pick the tulips. I love these guys. She shows up and there's just all these random people just sort of standing in the field, right? As the camera sort of like pans over, I'm like, what sort of hodgepodge group of people is this? The ages were mixed. In fact, I swear I think I saw someone who wasn't white. I mean, oh my gosh, Hallmark, you almost border on diverse. Not quite, I mean, not really, but ooh, we got real close there for a moment. It was a pretty funny looking group of people. In fact, it reminds me of a local vineyard here that when they were first starting up, they had all these vines and the grapes would all become ripe at the same time, and they didn't have the equipment or the employees to pick them all. So basically they would bring in people, locals, and we'd come in and we'd pick all the grapes. We'd spend all afternoon picking grapes, and then that night they'd have this big like buffet dinner and dancing and stuff, so that so if you pick the grapes, and you got to attend the dinner and dance, and of course they were selling their wine, so we all got tipsy and just had a grand old time. Those were things were fantastic, and it became so popular that there was like a waiting list, and that's what it reminded those group of pickers. They remind me of just this random group of people that are like, all right, let's get some harvesting done. Good times. Something else. So this isn't specific to this movie, but it did happen in this movie. Something that's become a pet peeve of mine in Hallmark movies. When characters have mugs or cups that are not see-through, they obviously don't have any liquid in them. Because you can tell by the way the characters hold them, or the actors hold them. They're like holding a cup that's supposed to be full of a hot beverage, and they're holding it like this while they're talking. And you're like, it's clear, their cups are clearly empty. Clearly empty. And I'm like, I don't need you to put hot coffee into the mug or the paper cup or whatever, but could you at least put something in? Put in some water, because then the weight, that's that subconscious feeling that you're used to holding something with liquid in it, so you're not talking with your hands while you're holding it. You're holding it steady and upright because it's full of a beverage. I have noticed it in pretty much all the movies. So it's not just this one. It did happen in this one when he handed her Earl Grey tea, and it's like, it's clearly empty. So I say, if it's supposed to be hot, then put a warm liquid in there. So maybe they like change it between hands a couple times, like you do when you have a hot beverage. But at least put water in it so that they're not tipping it over. Because it's supposed to be full. And final things I want to talk about is just the relationship with her parents at the end. So obviously it started out with her and her dad's relationship being a little strained, but as the movie went on, they got a little bit closer, and by the end near that, he started calling her Rosie, and it was adorable. I loved it. I was like, every time he said Rosie, I was like, oh, that's so sweet. And then when they finally got the hybrid rose to bloom, her mom's like, guys, we need a selfie with the flower. I'm like, oh my god, that is such a mom thing to do. I loved it. I loved that dynamic between her and her parents. It was so sweet, especially near the end there. So, or then her mom and dad sort of faking an excuse to sit down at the fair so that she gets alone time with Tom. It was just, I liked it. And that is all I have to say on Tulips in Spring. As far as Hallmark movies go, yeah, it was decent. Characters were believable. The whole sabotage business, that was a little ridiculous. And honestly, I feel like they could sue Violet for that, right? Like that's like in corporate espionage kind of thing, and that they could sue her for damages. And the operations manager who was in on it, they're all like, yeah, we, this all this extra business we're getting from this winning this flower competition, this will help save the business. And I'm like, yeah. And if you're hurting for money, I would go after Violet for what she did. That's just my opinion. I don't know anything about the law, so I don't know if that seems something you can do, but I would do that. But yeah, as I was saying, decent movie. Great little springtime romp. Not the best I've seen, but not the worst. So yeah, enjoyable way to spend an afternoon. That's all I have to say today. So I'm just going to continue knitting, and I hope you all have a fantastic week.